Color definitions. What do I mean by defining your colors? Well, if you remember back in the text definition lesson, this is really the same thing. You're gonna, beyond primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, we really need to define everything, like background colors, border colors, because ultimately we are creating a system that's going to be used for the first round of the designs or to even scale up for additional designs. So let's take a look at one of my recent projects and kind of really dig into how I defined all the colors for this particular app. This is the SmartLine app from GoDaddy inside of Framer here. I've shown some of these screens before, but this is basically a big document that has all of the components and everything inside of it. Now, in addition to this components document, I've also got this color document. So after everything was said and done, after I had worked through color combinations, changed my mind, redid it, got some feedback. I mean, this is not a one-time make the colors and then use them forever. This is an ever evolving process down to the very last day before handoff. So if you look in this particular document, these are the SmartLine colors. Okay, so these are all like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 13 colors that I ended up with on all of the UI screens for this particular app. Now, at the same time, GoDaddy had just gone through a huge rebranding. You can see a lot of that work on dribbble.com/GoDaddy. So they have a brand new brand book, new colors, new style guide, and not a lot of these particular apps that they have incorporated a lot of the new colors. And so I went through their brand guidelines and I pulled out some of the existing colors like this Everyday Blue 500, Everyday Blue 600. These were actual colors provided to me. We got to do our due diligence for the interface, and they're not necessarily saying that these colors are going to be used for text or white text. These are just kind of a huge spectrum of all of their new colors. So these were the ones that were closest to the colors that I wanted to use. So I just wanted to point out here that I just added some actual new colors, and I tried to keep it in the same naming convention for their actual like variable names, but I wanted to raise up this to be 3.0, and I wanted to lower this one down so it wasn't quite as dark. So they were in the same ballpark. I wanted to have my AA score and I wanted to have my AA large score. So these are the actual like primary colors, just in terms of like actual hue. But you'll remember I'm actually using black or this very dark color as the primary call to action. The primary hue was actually used as more of a secondary action here. So you can see like cancel, save, call, message. A lot of the kind of like action text was using that green, whereas the actual primary action was the actual dark color. So if you want to get really particular, the dark color was really the primary and the greenish color was kind of a secondary. But since it is kind of like the branding color and this is the icon and the app icon is not black, it kind of makes sense to call this the primary color because it is the brand color. So you can understand how that might get a little confusing, but I just wanted to throw that caveat in there. So let's look at all these 12 different colors in detail. So we've got a name for the color, the hex code, and then a little description of what it is. Standard white, primary background in the app. Makes sense? Now we've got SL gray, hex code. This is secondary. This is a subtle background for secondary interactive elements. So if you look over here at the components, you can see, let's see, where is a list? Okay, here's a list. This is this color right here. This is a subtle background for secondary components. You can see this very, very subtle background. You know, if you're gonna use a background color for every item, if you go too dark, it's just gonna feel like way too much. So I wanted just enough. Even if you couldn't perceive that color, it's still fine because you can tell that these are modules. But if you look at that on a phone, it is definitely very noticeable. And I spent so much time going lighter and darker and lighter and darker. A lot of time is spent just experimenting with all these colors, and only at the very end or you know, when you're ready, can you define these actual colors. So looking back here, we've got our third color, which is this SL gray. This is an accent color. It's for placeholder text and large single field full screen values with extra labeling. So what I mean by that is, for example, this right here. You can see this is a huge number for entering an area code, and the hex code is, here's the hex code, and I can go ahead and tell you this will absolutely fail color contrast. This is a 1.3 contrast, but this is also a very, very large color. So you could imagine if I used like a 9595, this would actually be way too dark for an input color. See, that is just way too dark. So I'm willing to use a failing color because it's really large. I mean, this is a 60 point type size, but we also say, find your new number, search any US area code. These are the labels for the input field, and the input field is the entire screen. So even if you can't see that, even if it's gone, you can see the blinking cursor and you can see that it says search any US area code. So with all of these surrounding elements, I'm okay using that as a failing score because it just looks better on the screen as a 60 point font. In fact, if you made it that 9.5 like I showed you, it's just too dark. It doesn't work as placeholder text. Okay, so that's our accent. So if you look right here, we've got our second accent color as like a darker gray. And the reason I'm using the darker gray is because I need a darker gray that's in the same ballpark that matches the interface, but this light gray that I'm using for the input field is just, that's too light to be used on any particular like icon or things that really need to stand alone as a readable element. So I need that second gray to be slightly darker so I can use it for things like this, for the contrasting on the white icon here, and so on and so forth. So right here we have our large text, which is going to be used for 18 point regular, 14 point bold helper text. This is going to be the large AA large score that's going to work for like this helper text right here that's underneath some of these buttons if you need it. And then also any of these, this large text right here. So you can see this large text is a little bit lighter than that text right there. And so that's where the AA large and the AA come in, because I want to have, as it gets larger, it doesn't need to be quite as dark because more surface area in each letter form. So we've got our two grays, one for the large text at AA large, one for anything under 18 point regular. That's going to be a little bit darker, so it'll pass AA accessibility. And that's where this color comes in. So this is my AA large and this is my AA. So this is the primary color, this 2B for primary text and CTA color. So if we look back over here, you can see here's our primary call to action, and then we've got our secondary action, and they're all using that same color. So my secondary text is using that secondary background, primary background color. We've got our backgrounds, and then right here on all of our text, we have that dark color. And also, side note, this is every single piece of text that's used in the app. Remember the rule of 4 from our typography homework. I've got 3 main sizes that are used throughout the app, 18, 16, and 14. And then for the occasional extra section, I'm using this 20 point regular. So these are our main gray colors. So we've got this white, the background color, and then we have 2 different colors for text and icons, and then a little bit darker for our gray actual text. So our AA large and then our AA color. And then we have our main text and our main call to action. And then moving on, we got our accent red color here. This is a very subtle like red background that is coupled with this darker red that would be for any error message or a missed call. So you can see I've got my 2 hex codes listed here, one for the background and one for the text. And then I'm using the same red color to kind of fill in that icon to let people know when they missed a call. And in addition to these 2 reds, we've got our variety of kind of teal colors. Now I've already talked about these 2, which are these 2 right here. You can see this is used as a primary action color for 18 point regular and 14 point bold text. It's a primary action for the text, not for a big button. And you can see this is used as darker action color for text sizes less than 18 point. Remember, AA large and the AA. So in the same way we're using this background for error messages and missed calls, we're using this background, same hue, but just kind of brought down a little bit for action items, kind of like this. So this is like slightly differentiated from standard list items that still also might be an action, but they're not really a true full action. Like call and message is going to be a little bit different than selecting like a time of day or something like that. And then I'm using that kind of same exact style for these little time pickers. So it just kind of adds the background hue with the color pulled back with that text. It just kind of makes it feel a little bit more interactive, like I'm actually doing something. So I'm defining this green color as doing something, whereas a lot of these darker black colors for navigation elements are going somewhere, with the exception of that big primary call to action, which is like save, next, go ahead, all those like big call to actions. So that is every single color used in the entire app. And it took a long time to get here. It took a lot of exploration, a lot of messing up and redoing it, getting feedback. It took a lot to get here. But in the end, you end up with something very simple that is scalable for all of the additional screens. Now, I don't create a big color swatch and define so meticulously every little color in this way for every single project. It's not a bad practice. And in fact, I should probably make that more of a priority when I actually produce a finished product. But there are times when you're just going faster and you're working with a smaller client, and you might just be working with one other person, and maybe you're just working so fast to get everything done that you never really set up this big style guide, style document, because things are getting built and kind of put into the code, and you have your code as like your source of truth versus trying to create it in a design document. And so that's what happened in this smaller project, this FiberStream project. I've shown you this before, but I was only working with one other person. Contrast that with the GoDaddy project. I'm working with a team. You know, I've got the VP of product, the VP of design. I've got probably 3 different product managers, 2 other designers, 2 different teams for development, for web and native. And so you have to be a lot more organized and collected and very, very like to the point. This is exactly why I'm using this, where it's used, because it's just so many lines of communication. Things can get kind of crazy if you don't have things documented. Whereas on this project, it was just one other guy and his developer, so we didn't have to go so crazy with the documentation. But that doesn't mean that I'm not very specific with my color definitions. Every single main call to action is this orange. Every single black piece of text is the same color. And then anytime I have like a secondary little like edit button, edit kind of secondary text, small links inside of things that are just like helper links, they're always this shade of gray right here. And it's always got this little underline. And so I'm using the exact same background color over and over and over. I'm using the same background for this footer as I am for some of these selection images. And so even these helper text, you can see this one is on a light module. So I know that the lightest I can possibly go is like 7676, because that's right around the AA score. But on a dark module, and this is not full black, this is a 111, just above the 00 for black. I know that a 7676, that is going to be a little bit too dark, and it's probably going to fail on my 111 background here. So you can see it's a 4.16. Whereas if I put back in the other one that I had, you can see that now is AA. So if I raise the lightness just a little bit, I can hit AA on the black background, the dark background, but it looks really similar to the light gray on the light module. You're going to have to choose a couple of different grays. Also, you know, see right here, I've got a lighter gray for the checkbox versus the text, because if the checkbox was that dark, it would just feel too heavy, and it almost seems active in a way. And you want to have a distinction between active and deactive things. So this is where those kind of like a range of 3 to 4 different grays are going to come into place. So even though I'm not really producing a ton of extra material and a ton of documentation for this particular project, I am trying to define colors in a very specific way and then reuse them for all of the screens and all of those components. Okay, for color definition homework, I want you to expand on the screen for google.com that you designed in the last lesson. And I want you to go in and design a search results screen. It doesn't have to be complicated. To save time, you can use this mobile version right here that doesn't even show all the results. Or if you want to go all out, you can do both or incorporate the desktop version. But I want it to have the same look and feel as your previous screens. And remember, we're super duper focused on which colors are we using. You can see they're using the primary color for sign in, and then they're also bringing in this green color. But look at this. These text links are way darker than the sign in button, but it actually looks kind of in the same ballpark. So you're gonna have to decide, do I use the exact same color or do I use a darker hue? Especially, I wanna make sure I hit a 4.5 accessibility score. And for some of these, maybe you wanna go up to 7.0 or even higher in terms of accessibility. Design these extra couple of screens that match the previous set. And then what I also want you to do, create a small style guide of swatches that kind of sucks all of the hex codes out of every screen. And then you're just gonna make a quick little description the same way I did these smart line colors. And that'll just kind of help you really see like, okay, here is the palette. This is the color we're using for this. This is the color we're using for that. And every single decision has been meticulously made and it all works together and here it goes. And so if you can start doing this for your projects or your client work or whatever, and you actually have a reason for all of these different color combinations, you're gonna have so much more power when you go to present your information to whoever that might be, to a client, coworker, colleague, investor, whatever. If you can actually go in and show the reason and where it's all used and it's the full system, it's just gonna give your decisions a lot more weight and a lot more power. So get started with the homework and let's see what you come up with.